Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Steve Seibert. I'm the chairman of the Florida Humanities Council. This is our hope that we create a community conversation. And that, in large part, is what the Florida Humanities Council is about. Our mission for our organization is to provide Floridians with the opportunity to explore the heritage, the traditions, and the stories of our state and its place in the world. We're an arm of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and so what we're all doing, what I think you're doing, is celebrating the art and the culture and the history, the music, the food, the elements of what makes us human and what connects us as Floridians. And we hope that this program is an example of that connection. So let me introduce the one person here at the beginning, Jonathan Way. Really honored to do this. Jonathan is a writer, he's a producer, he's a director, but really most importantly, he is the creator of this concept. He is the founder and the executive director of the Telling Project. He is based in Austin, Texas, and he's with us tonight to tee up this program and kind of explain what you're about ready to experience. Would you please welcome Jonathan Way?
I want to, first of all, say thank you to Steve and say thank you to Florida Humanities and WEDU. These cameras around here are being supplied by your public television affiliate, and they are actually shooting a documentary that is going to air sometime later this year about this process. They have been absolutely fantastic. I mean, if you look at this beautiful set and this beautiful theater, and again, all of these incredible kind of equipment and people who are involved in this, it has been a tremendous, tremendous investment on the part of Tampa and the Tampa area to make this happen. And I want to say thank you to them, and please give them a warm, warm applause. I don't want to say very much because what's going to happen here is much more important than what I have to say. What I will tell you is we have been putting presentations on, like Telling Tampa, since 2008. This is going to be our 28th production. We've been doing this all around the country. And basically, when Steve said, thank you for being participants here, he hit it right on the nose. This is not a performance in the way that you will think of as performance. These people actually have served in the military and or their families have served in the military, and they are going to talk to you about their own experiences. They are not actors. They weren't actors at least until about 2 months ago when Lisa Powers, our director, started working with them to bring them to here, bring them to this readiness, bring them to this presentation. But really, this is a community experience. These folks live with you. They live here in Largo. They live in Tampa. They live in St. Pete's. They live all around here. They shop with you. They work with you. They go to school with you. Their kids play on playgrounds with you. They are community members, and they've served in the military, and they've done extraordinary things, and they've done extraordinary things for all of us. So what's really happening here is that we are all here to learn about ourselves. We're going to listen to them talk about their experiences, the experiences that they undertook for us and at our behest. And in so doing, we're going to understand the world that we live in a little better, and we're going to understand ourselves a little better, because they have a great deal to teach us about who we are. So, I'm going to reiterate, cell phones off, please. And I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm going to say, please enjoy the show, and we will look forward to speaking with you afterwards.
You can rehearse to a certain point, and then it starts. just like you rehearsed. And then from out of nowhere, a bad guy pops up, and everything you just rehearsed, well, it goes out the window. You stick to the basics, you adapt, and you overcome. That's what makes the mission. Sometimes it is successful, sometimes it is not. So are you ready? I said, are you ready? Yes. Then let's go. My dad was in the Army. My grandfather and my great uncle served in the Army during World War II. My mother's father served in the U.S. Coast Guard. My step-grandfather served in the U.S. Navy. I had an uncle that served in the Army during Vietnam. It's something I wanted to carry on.
I don't think I'd even turned 21. It was almost my birthday, and there was this Navy recruiter who came into the restaurant where I was working. I was attending Hudson College and the University of Maine at Orono, and I remember thinking, I'm never going to leave Maine. So, unbeknownst to my parents, I took the test, and went through the process, and I enlisted in the United States Navy.
I remember being little and looking at all those old pictures of my great-grandpa in his drill sergeant uniform. And with so many members of my family having served, there's just pictures everywhere at my grandma's house. And I remember being just so enthralled by them and what they had done. It was ingrained in me early on.
I was staying in a pool hall when I was about 13 years old. I used to sleep underneath the pool table. The lady that owned the pool hall really looked out for me. I was the youngest guy in high school, smallest guy on the football team. The football coach even called me in his office one day. He wanted me to quit because he was afraid I was going to get hurt. So I convinced myself then I was going to teach him a lesson. When I was 15, I went down to the Marine Corps recruiter, told him I wanted to be a Marine. He showed me some videos, and that was about it.
On September 11, 2001, I was living in Frederick, Maryland, and I was the catering manager for a Spanish restaurant. And that morning, the owner came upstairs into the office, and he said, "Did you see the picture of the Twin Towers?" And I thought to myself, that's strange. Why would he buy a picture of the Twin Towers for a Spanish restaurant? He said, "Come downstairs and take a look." So I went downstairs, I saw the TV, and I immediately felt a strong urge to serve. After having a series of events that kept me from enlisting right away, I finally enlisted in 2005. I was 27 years old.
I'd really wanted to do some form of civil service. I don't know why, I've always just been that way. My dad was cautiously supportive. He would say things like, "You should do what'll make you happy." My mom was much more reluctant though, but she didn't really say it. Although I do remember this one time that we were sitting down at the dinner table and she looked at me and said, "You know, there's other options. There's medical school, Harvard." I mean, I understood what she was getting at. I graduated high school on the 1st of June in 1998, and on the 28th of June, 1998, I reported for basic training at the United States Military Academy. I was 17 years old.
We flew into San Diego, and there was a guy standing there at the bus waiting for us in uniform, a Marine. He asked us to get on the bus, asked us for our folders, and we gave them to him. He was very friendly, very polite, and I remember us talking as we were getting on the bus. This isn't a big deal, this is gonna be great.
Indoc is really light. You do push-ups now and then, you get quite a bit of sleep, 6 hours a night, 3 squares a day. This is cake, this is gonna be easy.
I remember my recruiter saying, "Terry, it's going to be easy. It's going to be fun."
Good times.
Get the fuck off my bus! Get on the yellow footprints like your bodies! Move, move, move! Feet at a 45-degree angle! Those are the ones seeing your trousers! Get your eyeballs off me!
So we walked out to Charlie Company's area, and there's this red line painted across the ground.
Step to the red line. Do not step over the line. Do not step on the line. Step to the red line, cadet. Team, present arms, report.
Sir, new cadet Simonson reports a cadet in the red sash for the first time as ordered. That time they would correct any mistakes. They'd correct your hand salute if you were stepped on the line or over the line. They step you back. If you stumble over any words, you start the whole process over again. There are firm, established, well-known standards, and you'll either meet them or you will go home. It's actually a very simple way of life.
Fall in. Mark time. March.
I had a big mouth and I was always in trouble. And each company had a flag with a number on it. Our company's number was K071. Now, whether it was because I had a big mouth or I was the shortest person there, I had to carry that flag, and I hated that flag. Some people thought it was an honor, but I'm telling you, I had to carry it everywhere. I had to take it to bed, I had to take it to the bathroom, I had to take it to chow, and if somebody got a hold of my flag, I was in trouble.
Company, halt.
I'm surprised they even let me out of boot camp.
Came to a point in Marine Corps boot camp I wanted to quit. I didn't think I was going to make it. So I went to go talk to my drill instructor. There was a guy standing in front of me, waiting to talk to the drill instructor as well. Private Myers. He was a good guy. We all liked him. But he stood there, and before you talk to the drill instructor, you got to pound on the hatch. And when he pounded on that hatch, and he turned his face, and I saw the tears rolling down his eyes, and he was crying. He said, I don't want this anymore. I can't take it. I don't want to be a Marine. I want out. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's me. He's saying what I'm going to say next. Well, this is back in 1976. The drill instructor said, come here, Myers. And when he went in there and they secured the hatch, and I heard the yelling and the screaming and the crashing and the booming and banging, at that point I realized I got 78 days. I got to put up with this.
On January 3rd, 2006, I was at boot camp in Parris Island, and we were training to do the rappel tower. And inside the rappel tower, there's the fast roping evolution. It's for training for coming out of a helicopter. It's a 33-foot drop. You're not secured. While we were climbing up to the top, we were at the top of the platform, and I guess the instructor thought that I was hesitating, like I didn't want to go. So he actually pushed me off of the platform without my hands being on the rope. I fell 33 feet down. I landed standing straight up. And my immediate injury was a tib-fib fracture to my right ankle. But I immediately got up, put my gear back in the box, got back into formation. It wasn't until 2100 that evening that my senior drill instructor ordered me up to the front. She ordered me to take off my boot. Took off my boot, my ankle swelled up this big. The next morning I was in medical. By that afternoon, I was dropped to the female rehabilitation platoon. I never, ever, ever lost motivation, even though I spent 3 months in there. While I was in there, I met another recruit. She had failed her initial strength test. We became really good friends, and I'll never forget this. It was Easter morning, 2006, and come back from church, and she was sitting on her footlocker, and she was crying. Her husband, he was a Lance Corporal in the Marines at the time, and he was serving in Iraq. And I just knew it when I saw her. Found out later that he had been killed by an IED over in Iraq. And I remember thinking to myself, here we are on this island, we're secluded, we're training, but ultimately, we were fighting.
Right, peace. Forward, march. Mama, mama, can't you see?
Mama, mama, can't you see?
What the Army's done to me?
What the Army's done to me?
Took away my faded jeans.
Took away my faded jeans.
Now I'm wearing Army greens.
Now I'm wearing Army greens.
Took away my Cadillac.
Took away my Cadillac.
Now I hump it on my back.
Now I hump it on my back.
Company, halt. Right, peace. Dismissed. It's like spokes on a machine. One turns this way and one turns this way. But in order to make the machine work, they have to turn together. Each person has their own individual role to play.
On my 18th birthday, I had a headache at school that left me without sight for about 3 hours. The nurse at the time said that my eyes still reacted to light, that I must be faking, and told me just to lie down. We went to the doctor that night, and by the next morning, about 13 hours later, I was having my first brain surgery. I had a tumor. That was it, no warnings. Rachel Owens, she was my best friend. She was there through all of it with me. I had just had the brain tumor. I actually rode to the airport with her to meet her brother from basic training. Well, we always joked about me marrying her brother without ever having met him at all. He got off the plane, he came through the doors, and he hugged everyone first. He said, "You're here, I may as well hug you too." So I gave him a hug. I told his sister that day that he would be my husband. I said that if I had to wait forever, he'd be mine.
My first duty station was in Barstow, California. I'd been in 2 years. I made sergeant when I was 19 years old. But I was an admin clerk. That's not the Marine I wanted to be. I wanted to get some. So I re-enlisted and went to the infantry. I went to the 5th Marines, 1979 and 1980. We went on a lot of amphibious operations. Funny thing about amphibious operations was when you're a Marine Corps rifle squad leader, you're the last one on the Amtrak, the amphibious tractor. So that means when the hatch opens, you're the first one off. And when they opened up the hatch, I always got wet. The water would always seep in. My guys just always enjoyed watching Sergeant D get drenched again. Couldn't do it, nothing about it. Same when you attack a hill. When that hatch opens, you're sitting at the end of the hatch. I was the first one to get gas in the face every time. You know it's coming. Same when we were in helicopters. When we're on the choppers, hatch opens, the first one, always gonna get something. But the time that I remember most, where I got a real good natural high off of being a Marine, we were on amphibious operation Team Spirit in the Philippines. I was fortunate enough to be on the USS Tarawa, landing helicopter assault ship. And I was on a chopper. And what was great about being on the chopper for this operation, while the choppers are up in the air making a circle, the Amtraks are coming out making their circle, my chopper was tilted at an angle so I could look down and I can see all the Amtraks coming out making their circle. And then they all get in a line, all of our choppers get in a line. We attack the hills and they attack the beach. It was at that moment I realized that's what I signed for, getting ready to kick some ass.
After boot camp, I was assigned to cryptologic training in Pensacola, Florida. From there, I went to my first duty station in Washington, D.C. to work for the commander of the Naval Security Group Command. I was initially assigned to administration, where we typed awards. We typed on word processors, which at that time were considered high-tech computers. We had a 1-inch screen, and we typed in the words, watching them go across, hoping to catch any mistakes before it was printed out. After a short period of time, I was sent to work for the Command Force Master Chief. He oversaw all the enlisted cryptologists. I was really lucky while I was stationed at NASTEC Group because I got to live in the fire marshal quarters. They trained us to put out fires, to look for suspicious packages or people, and it was a really great experience. I love DC, and I love it till this day. After DC, I went to NSGA Keflavik, Iceland. That was really unique. The Marines, the Navy, and the Air Force, we were all stationed there, and we all had our own unique operations and what we were supposed to do. As a CTA, I was assigned to the elephant cage. I assisted in the collection of intelligence information. At that time, we were in the Cold War, and Russia was our enemy. I remember one of the unique things about Keflavik is it's always windy. And believe it or not, at that time, I only weighed 85 pounds. And if there was a high wind warning, you had to weigh at least 100 pounds to go out. So, yeah. So let's say I wanted to go get some chow, or I wanted to go to the Marine bar. The Marines had a bar, and they served hamburgers, actual beef burgers, not horse burgers. I would have to get 2 Marines to escort me, or else I could actually blow away. My favorite off-base activity was to go into Reykjavik. There was no crime. You could actually leave your purse outside a store and nobody would steal it. I had the opportunity to go up to Akureyri, and that's where the glaciers were, and there were a lot of hot springs. Iceland is a beautiful, beautiful country. I actually, while I was stationed in Keflavik, I met my husband, but at that time, he was only my friend. And I remember when we got our orders for our next tour of duty, we both told each other, "It's been great knowing you, have a nice life." Well, I was only in DC about a week, and he showed up on my doorstep with flowers and a teddy bear. And he said, "I can't stop thinking about you." 2 years later, we were married.
Very cute, too. Very cute. Not that I'm going to need the microphone. Sometime in 1980, 81, in that time frame, I was in Oceanside, California. And the bus rolled down the middle of Oceanside Boulevard with loudspeakers. If you're with the 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, get on the bus, report back to your unit. We didn't know what the hell was going on, so we did it. When we got back to our base camp, there was barbed wire all the way around the camp. MPs were running all over the place. There was guards posted so we couldn't leave the camp. They had all of us get into a formation. We went to the armory. We withdrew all of our weapons. We withdrew all of our ammunition. We had Marines that were home on leave that were called back. They were returned back to our unit immediately. If a Marine had less than 30 days remaining in the Corps, he was discharged. He's done, just like that. We were becoming what's called TO, the table of organization, everything you need for a Marine unit to go to combat. That night, I saw grown men sit on their footlockers and cry. They had to write a letter to their loved ones, no phone calls. You were done. But then it really struck home when our lieutenant walked in. He was a great guy. We loved him. We would follow him anywhere because he did everything we did and then some. He led us. But when he came in and there was water in his eyes, scratchy throat, and he gave us the breakdown. We were waiting for the USS John F. Kennedy, who was sitting off the coast of San Clemente, to take us to El Salvador. The Contras and the rebels, they were having their thing going on. It was a real screwy situation, but we were getting ready to go to combat. That's what we were trained to do. So we laid on the parade deck for 2 or 3 days, just waiting for that call, waiting for the choppers to take us to the ships. And then we got disappointed. The word came down from Congress that we didn't need to go. They got us all built up, ready to go fight, and then we don't. They called us off. Ooh, fucking rah.
I never drove anywhere in DC. I only lived wherever I could take the subway or a bus. And what I loved about working at the Pentagon is the subway went right into the Pentagon. I was assigned to the Chief of Naval Operations Staff working for Navy 10-CAP, which stood for the Naval Tactical Exploitation of National Capabilities. We worked with the satellites and the astronauts. You talk about clearances, everybody had to have a background check. Everybody had to be vetted. I could only go so far in the Pentagon, and then I'd need another clearance to go further. And you never wanted to run into a Marine and not have the right clearances. It really gave you a great sense of pride to be working for the Pentagon and serving your country during the Cold War. One of the greatest things that happened to me is, while I was there, I was selected Pentagon Sailor of the Quarter, and I also received the Navy Achievement Medal. For me as a CT, that was huge, because as a CT, often you were never recognized for what you did because you couldn't talk about it. It came time for my next duty station, and the military was downsizing. The military budget was being cut, but they came and they said that I was selected to go to Admiral Staff. This was a big deal. But the problem is that Admiral Staff meant that out of 365 days a year, I could possibly be gone for 300 of them. And my husband, he was going to stay where he was. So, do I re-enlist or do I not re-enlist?
I graduated from West Point in 2002 into an evolving, developing, but would eventually become a global conflict. As opposed to preparing for anything, we were preparing for one thing. We were actually really lucky because we knew where we were going to go. I completed the Armor Officer Basic Course at Fort Knox, Kentucky in December, while my wife was at the Military Police Officers Basic Course at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. We were both assigned to 1st Armored Division at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and I deployed to Iraq about a month after arriving at 1st Armored Division, Fort Riley, Kansas. Now, my wife was assigned to the 977th MP Company, and she was attached to the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, and by the time she got into theater, about a month behind me, my armor battalion had already assaulted well up to the northwest in Iraq. And I'll tell you, the greatest joy of my day, being married to another service member that was deployed with me, was using these computer systems in our tanks and trucks. There's a computer called the Blue Force Tracker. And it was kind of like a moving map. And it had icons for all the friendly and enemy units around you that you could see. And if all the satellites were working correctly and the communications were working correctly, I could scroll from where I was in the Northwest all the way back down to Kuwait. And I could see this little icon. It was my wife's truck. And I would know that she was okay, and I could see her run missions between Kuwait and Basra. That was the best part of my day, knowing she was safe. Well, that winter, it actually got really cold in Iraq. In fact, by December, it was snowing. So you can imagine the joke immediately became, all right, guys, that's it. Let's go ahead and pack it up. We're going to head home. It's official. Hell is frozen over. We are done here. And that takes me right to Christmas morning. Christmas morning, 2003, I'm nearing the end of my first year deployment. And our chaplain comes over to me and asks if we can take him with us on a mission. Now, as a leader, I'm kind of a toss-up here, because if I take the chaplain, then I have to leave behind one of my combat soldiers, and that puts us in a bad position if we encounter the enemy. But I knew where we were going on this particular day. It was a routine patrol to a quiet part of town, so I told him, hey, come on, we'll get you out there. And he wasn't there to proselytize. It had nothing to do with religion. You know, just the chaplain doesn't get out very much. And he wanted to see and meet some of the people before we went back home. So I took him to this falafel stand, and we were there, and it was already a public forum anyways, people eating and conversing, and it was actually a really good time. There were no issues, no openly hostile actions, and you know, that might have had something to do with the tanks and the trucks and all the guns that we had, but overall, it was actually a really amicable exchange of ideas. And while we were there, a couple blocks away, two insurgents decided they were going to try to emplace an IED. And something went really wrong for them because it blew up while they were emplacing it and killed both of them. And with my platoon being so close, we were the first ones to respond to the scene and try to secure it. We linked up with the local medical examiner from the Abu Ghraib hospital, and we were trying to identify the people. And I grabbed the medical examiner and I brought him over to me and I said, hey, I think most of that guy's head is up in that chain link fence on the highway overpass. And about that time, one of my soldiers, who was about 100 yards this way, holds up a hand. And he waves at us. He goes, hey, I found a hand over here. It was dark. It was just grotesque. It's called graveyard humor. And it's one of the things that you do to cope with the realities you encounter every day. And you know, it's like, this is my Christmas now. This is what I associate with Christmas. So hey, Merry Christmas. You know, you're trying to stay true to yourself. You're trying to celebrate. You're getting letters and cards from home, pictures. And everybody's happy. And then you look around where you're at, this desolate wasteland, and you ask yourself, why am I here? Man, as a leader, it's hard because you have to stay mentally with your soldiers. You have to affirm them. You have to remind them that what we're doing is important. And most importantly, you've got to keep them focused. After all, stay alert!
Stay alive!
So, coming home that year, it was winter in Kansas. And even though snow on the ground, I saw the most vibrant greens I've ever seen in my life. And as our armor battalion formed up outside the hangar, Fort Riley, Kansas, we had these huge motorized doors. We knew our families were inside, and as we stood there, the doors started to crack, and they opened up. And the light and the warmth of inside the hangar poured out over the formation, and we could hear people cheering, and there were 2,000 people inside. And then we marched inside the hangar, and there were confetti cannons and a band, and it was this most incredible experience. And I just thought, this is what it must feel like to ride through Rome on a chariot. Oh, it's the most incredible feat.
I joined initially for Afghanistan. That's where I wanted to fight. That's where I wanted to be. Basic training was really a lot of wooded terrain stuff, so I didn't even think about going to Iraq. But then when the orders came through, they're talking about how it's a city environment, but that there's bombs everywhere. So you get up to it, you start thinking about it, freaks you out a little bit, gets your nerves going. But at the same time, I wanted to experience it. We were stationed just south of Baghdad, about 30 minutes outside of the green zone, a place called Fob Falcon. And for the most part, we drive 5 miles an hour up and down from one end of the AO to the other, doing route clearance. And as quick reaction force, we'd oftentimes get involved in other missions. On a typical day, we'd patrol for 8 to 10 hours. I'd spend another 4 to 5 hours in the motor pool doing vehicle maintenance after. About 2 weeks in, we got hit by our first IED. I remember that being equally awesome as it was scary. Everything kind of slowed and the windshield shattered. It was almost cinematic, like it wasn't real. Nobody got hurt, so that was the cool part. And I remember just thinking, did I just get blown up? Did that really just happen? I couldn't believe it. But then obviously it's an eye-opener. So from there on out, they prepare you for it by saying, look out for trash on the side of the road. Well, there's trash everywhere. Everything looks like an IED, you know? So this is always a battle between the lower enlisted and the leadership, because you want to check everything. But at the same time, when you make that call to explosive ordnance disposal, it's a 4 to 5 hour process, if not longer. And it never was an IED. Not once the whole year we were there. About 2 weeks later, we lost our first 2 guys. I remember that being a reality check. Welcome to Iraq.
Now, our armored battalion was only home for a short period of time, and then we deployed to Iraq for a second year. My wife, Julie, gave birth to our first son during that deployment. I was notified by a Red Cross message, read something like wife in labor, call hospital at earliest convenience. So I secured our battalion satellite phone, went outside of the little outpost we were at, and climbed up on the roof and ducked down to stay beneath this little half wall so that I wasn't exposed as a target, and dialed home. And as the ladies in the room can probably attest, my wife had just given birth to this amazing child of ours. And so that conversation was a little vapid. So I asked if I could talk to our son, and she had taken the phone and held it down by his ear. And in those few precious moments of that conversation, the compound we were in started getting mortared. And so I said to my son, hey, I love you, kid. Something just blew up. I got to go. And hit the power button, collapsed the antenna, jumped off the roof, and got inside of the safety of the building. Coming home from the second year was a really different experience. You know, the first time we came home, everyone was in awe of this monumentally, historically significant accomplishment we'd all done. The second deployment, though, we had deployed into the status quo. And we had spent a year maintaining the status quo. And when we came home, we left the status quo for the unit that had relieved us. Everything was subdued. It was very quiet. My wife and I met her after the reunion ceremony, and I just saw her and said, hey, sweetheart, I missed you. I saw my son and said, hey, kiddo, it's nice to meet you. Thank God that's over. Let's get a taco. My wife and I, we liked our first kid so much that we decided to have another one. His name would have been Wyatt, but we lost him to an umbilical cord accident at the very end of the second trimester. But never one to be defeated. Our third son, Alistair, was born about a year after we lost Wyatt. And then our fourth son, Galen, he was born 1 year and 4 hours after Alistair.
We were 2 days from going home. We were doing a mission called Right Seat Ride, which is where the new unit comes in and gets to know the AO from the old unit. So we're taking around the new guys. Christmas is coming up. We know we're close, we're almost done, and we're happy. Then all of a sudden, boom, it went off. We're all knocked unconscious. I wake up and the vehicle's still moving. I don't feel anything. I don't really know what's going on, but I see flesh is lining the interior. The Humvee's full of smoke and ash, so obviously I know we've been hit. I hear my gunner scream, and I look back, and he's missing both his legs. And then the guy behind me, he asked me to open his door for him because his arms are all shredded from the shrapnel. So I turn and I open it, but then when I turn back around, I must have moved a piece of my broken femur out of place or something, because I immediately feel this intense burn. And I look down and I see a bunch of metal and rubber hanging out of my thigh. And at that point, that's when all the pain catches up. And it's just yelling, lots and lots of yelling. Fuck, fuck, fuck. And I eventually look over and I knew my commander was dead. He was in really bad shape. We're eventually pulled out of the Humvee. We take a couple pop shots from some guys waiting for us to get hit. My guys fight them off, and the chopper comes and eventually takes us out. So they take me first to the Baghdad Combat Sport Hospital. They clean out my leg, take the shrapnel out, and they stabilize me. And they send me to Balad, which was the main hospital in Iraq at the time. Again, they stabilized me, nonstop surgeries for 2 to 3 days, and then they sent me to Landstuhl, Germany, and then finally to Walter Reed in Washington, D.C. It was a week after I arrived at Walter Reed that my femoral artery burst. My heart stopped twice on the operating table. They ended up saving my life, but the tourniquet was on for so long, it was a 14-hour surgery, that most of the muscle in my lower limb died. I had 33 some odd surgeries to try and fix it, but everything kept falling short. 2 years after my injury, my leg was amputated.
In August of 2002, rumors started spreading that we were going to be deploying. February 2003, we get our orders and we land in Kuwait. They tell us that we're there for force protection. There's not really a whole lot going on in the desert. So they give us the tasking of patrolling the oil pipeline that ran between Iraq and Kuwait. This one day we were out on a patrol and we came across this lizard. It looked small from a distance, so we decided we were going to move a little bit closer. Well, I guess we got just a little too close because that lizard stood up on his hind legs and started chasing after us. We spun the Humvee around and went in the opposite direction. That was probably about the funniest thing that happened to me while I was in Iraq. The end of March 2003, we get our orders to move into Iraq. We fly into Ain Najaf, Iraq. I was the radio telephone operator from my platoon at the time. We get our first major mission, and that mission is to clear a compound that's been reported to be housing the Fedayeen, Saddam's special forces. But before we were able to get to this compound, we had to clear out this corn mill factory and a series of little small buildings around it. So we send out 3rd Squad and Weapons Squad to clear the outer buildings of this corn mill factory, and myself, the LT, and 1st Squad go inside the main building. Now, mind you, this building had been hit by artillery prior to us getting there. So when we get inside, we find that there's just dry corn everywhere. It was probably about this high. And trying to move through that with everything but the kitchen sink on your back was kind of fun. So we make it through this building and we link up with the rest of the platoon. And we find an opening along a thin wood line that led us out into this field to get to the compound. And as we start walking, we start taking sniper fire. Well, we do a movement to contact and start moving towards where we're taking fire. The Fisters, they're trying to get a grid coordinate to call for fire, but they weren't able to do so. So they hand me the binos, and me, the LT, and 1st Squad, we move up to this wall that was surrounding the compound. The compound wall had these little peepholes that were probably about the size of a cinder block. So I stick the binos in there, I get a grid, and I call it back to the Fisters. There's like, roger that, we got it. You guys need to break contact. We're doing a call for fire mission. So we tell 1st Squad to go ahead and pull back. We'd cover them, and then they could cover us when we go to fall back. So they fall back, they call us, we're in position. As the LT and I started to turn, we began taking sniper fire from a building that was somewhere in this location. Before you knew it, we were pinned down.
When he deployed the first time, I actually had moved in with his mom to keep myself busy. I wrote him every single day, and I also kept a notebook on me, and I sent that eventually. I literally sent a letter every single day. If I had nothing else to say, I'd just write, "I love you." I was reading some of those notes later, and I was like, "Scott, how did you ever put up with me? I was hopelessly in love, just waiting for him to come home." Waiting and waiting. I got 3 phone calls, 4 physical letters, and about 6 or 7 emails. One of the phone calls was insane because he just had to get off the phone. There was explosions, whistles, and bells. We didn't get to say goodbye. It was awful. Pins and needles every day. Pins and needles every day. Every day you watch the news. I had to stop because at some point you get paranoid. Every time you hear anything about anyone getting injured or any explosion or battle of any kind, you ask yourself, is that him?
The rounds. I could literally hear them going over my head. I could hear them impacting the wall, and I felt the little chunks of the wall coming off and hitting me in the face. I called the company commander over the radio and told him that we were pinned down. He called back and said, "I need to see your exact location." So the LT, he takes off his Kevlar, and he pulls out this strip of what they call VI-17 panel. It was about this long. We had cut the whole panel into strips. And it was a neon pink on one side and neon orange on the other side. So we extend the long whip antenna, and he ties it to the end and puts his Kevlar back on, and we take the long whip antenna and we wave it back and forth like this. Company commander calls and says, "All right, I got your position. You need to get out of there, or it's going to be a messy situation." So we collapse the long whip antenna, and we start low crawling this way, and the rounds are still going over our head. We low crawl this way, rounds still going over our head, and we go back and forth for a minute, and then we stop. We look at each other and go, "All right, let's go down this way a little bit further." So we go down this way a little bit further, and we stop, and we listen. We didn't hear any more rounds. We looked at each other and said, "Okay, let's make a break for it." As we started coming over the berm, I get a call over the radio. Get down, get the fuck down, incoming. Boom! Everything goes black. I couldn't get up. I couldn't move. I couldn't feel anything. I could hear the rounds around me impacting. I almost felt like at one point I could see myself laying there on the ground. And then from out of nowhere, it felt like somebody kicked me. Somebody kicked the wind back into me. And then your vision starts to come back. It's kind of blurry at first. And there's the ringing in the ear, and then all of a sudden your ears pop and you really hear sound again. And your face is covered in dirt. And I notice that there's helicopters flying above my head. I look over and I see the LT laying there. I lean over. Sir, you okay, sir? He kind of goes through that same notion, and he looks at me and says, "Yeah." And we stand up and start running. I guess they were sending the aid and litter team out to meet us because they thought we were dead, but we met them halfway. Beyond that, I don't really remember a whole lot about my first tour in Iraq.
I actually saw him on the news. He walked right across the camera. I don't know what they were doing. I asked my friend, "Did you see that? That was Scott." I pulled it up online. I looked at it 4 or 5 times before I realized. I sent the link to his mom. I was just like, wow, I found him on there. There he was in the blink of an eye. It was a relief because for now you knew that he was all right. Anytime they would report a loss, You're just like, please don't let it be mine, but please don't let it be anyone else's. Unfortunately, it has to be someone's. We actually got married when he came home shortly after. We got married by a little old man. Him and his wife had been married for 52 years, and the secret to their marriage is that every day after everything was done, no matter how early or how late it was, even when they had kids too, that they sat down together and had a glass of wine. They didn't even have to drink it. They just poured it and spent a few minutes talking about their day, and that's how they kept their relationship strong. When we came home, having a conversation was all new. You had to relearn each other, both of you, because you've grown used to doing things the way that you're used to doing them, and he's grown used to doing things the way that he's used to doing them. To a soldier, it might be perfectly acceptable to put your socks back on, but to a wife at home, they should be in the washer. We didn't really talk for the first year all that much, good, bad, or indifferent. We just hugged each other and walked away. He went to work, I stayed home, and we did our own things.
When I enlisted into the Marine Corps, I went into the Air Wing, and I was given 6092, which is an airframe mechanic. And A school was at Pensacola Naval Air Station. And I'll never forget it. We were real close to graduation. Me and the guys, we decided to go to the E-Club. We were going to have a couple drinks, play some pool, have a good time, get ready to celebrate graduation, moving on. So while we were there, one of the guys that I was with, a Marine, he made friends with a guy in the Navy who was stationed there. And the plan was, after the E-Club was going to close, we were going to go back to his barracks, play some cards, continue drinking. So we all formed up out front of the E-Club, and we're going to head out. So I remember we started walking. We were walking back to his barracks, and as we got closer and closer to his barracks room, I looked around, and all the guys that I was with, they were gone. And as we got up to his room, I said, where did my friends go? And he said, they said they're stopping at their rooms, they're going to get more beer, or this or that. And shortly after entering his room, I was attacked and raped that night. I remember running from his room and crying. And I saw one of the Marines that I was with. He was actually coming to his room. And I got back, and the next morning, the CO was there, and the higher-ups got involved, and immediately there was an investigation going on. Unfortunately, though, I got pregnant from that rape. And that pregnancy ended up being an ectopic pregnancy. So I ended up losing one of my fallopian tubes. Like I said, there was an investigation going on, and I don't know why I felt the strength, but I just wanted to keep going forward. I had orders to go to C School, which is in Oceana, Naval Air Station, Oceana, Virginia, and I just wanted to go forward. So when I got to Oceana, I felt like I was doing pretty well. I was putting things into perspective, and like I said, I was doing really well. I ended up graduating at the top of my class. I picked up Meritorious Lance Corporal, and I got first pick of duty stations. And I chose to go to Marine Corps Air Station Iwakuni, Japan. That was another reason for me joining the Marines. I wanted to travel. And I got to Japan. I loved Japan. Japan was awesome. The base, it's about 3.5 miles around. We share with the Japanese. It is a beautiful, beautiful country. Unfortunately, though, the Marine Corps is very small and word travels very fast. Like I said earlier, I was injured, and when I got to Japan, I was given a light duty chit for my leg. And in the Marine Corps, it's all about physical fitness. So because I was given the light duty chit, I wasn't able to be out in the shop working along the other Marines I had been training with. So I was put into the PC, into the office, product control. And I was in there in the office, and because I was so, higher in age, I was in with the gunnies, the master sergeants, and all the other Marines thought that I was in there schmoozing it up, and it just made everything worse. The isolation just set in, and I just felt horrible. All the friends that I had made, they were disappearing. It was just me and a select few. I was about 2 weeks from leaving Japan. I had a year there, and I was about 2 weeks from leaving Japan. All my gear was packed. I had orders to go to Camp Pendleton. And I had decided to go to the E-Club that night. Went there, had a couple beers, I played some pool. While I was there, I saw a private from Supply. He was also in my squadron. And this private, he had been knocked down many times, petty theft, things like that. And I had loaned him $20 a couple months prior, and I said hello to him, shot some pool, had a couple beers, and went back to my barracks room. It was about 2300 that night. Came back to my room, like I said, I had nothing there. I had my laptop. I remember putting the movie The Departed into my laptop, turned it on, got into my rack. About 20 minutes later, I heard a pounding at my hatch. I opened it up. There was the private. He said he was there to pay back the $20 that he owed me. So I let him in. We made small talk. He handed me the $20. He headed for the hatch, and I headed for the rack. The way that the room is set up is that there's a cement wall in between the rack and the hatch. So he headed for the hatch, and I thought that I heard it close. But it didn't close. He waited on the other side of the wall for me to go to sleep. And then he brutally attacked and raped me that night. And I've talked to many, many therapists since then, many doctors. And I view that rape like I was on the ceiling, like I was outside of my body. There's that fight, flight, or freeze. And I was completely frozen. And that eats away at me every single day, because here I am, I'm a Marine. I'm trained to fight. And I didn't. Even though he admitted to raping me, the command didn't believe it, and he was walking free. And as I said before, the base was extremely small. And I remember trying to go to work right after it happened. It was just a couple blocks away from the barracks. And I remember walking down the sidewalk, and I heard people whispering and pointing at me going, "There's that girl. That's the one she was raped. That's the one that was raped." It made it so hard that I locked myself in my barracks room, and I just drank for 2 weeks. I didn't come out at all. One day my sergeant major came in, and he said, "The CO is going to keep you here until this entire thing is finished, until all this legal process is over, which could be up to 1 year." And I flipped out. I called my mother in Sarasota, and I said, "Mom, you've got to do something. You've got to help me." She made many phone calls to my command, and nothing came of it. Finally, she called what I believe is the senator's office, who then contacted the Fleet Pacific Command office, who contacted the base CO, who then contacted my CO, and he said, "Let her go." And my career ended shortly after.
Superfly!
Hurrah. I wanted to be normal, you know? I wanted to be a Marine. But the thing is, I wasn't normal anymore. I love the Marine Corps. I still love it to this day. But the fact is that the Marines I was with, they didn't want to believe, they didn't care to believe, or they just didn't want to have anything to do with me. I was medically discharged and I was retired from the Marine Corps. And I tell you, I fought very, very, very hard for that. To have them acknowledge what was done to me, all that humiliation, all the talking, all the gossiping, it was so humiliating. I had no one.
I got back from my second deployment on November 21st, 2006. My wife was there. I was just so happy to see her. I just grabbed her up and squeezed her as hard as I could. I began to slowly decompress, and I started having problems.
He would forget what he was doing. He'd be getting up and getting ready for work and ask me where we were going. Or he would be going to Walmart about a block away, and he'd call me and say, where was I going? What was I doing?
I started going to see mental health because I didn't know what was going on. Initially, they thought it was post-combat PTSD. Then in 2008, my unit deployed to Afghanistan, and I stayed back.
He was angry he couldn't be with his guys. There were some people that talked to him like he was nothing. They told him every day that he was nothing. It seemed like every day he would come home and it was something else.
I kept asking them to send me to the TBI clinic because I was having memory issues and they were progressively getting worse. But the doctors, they seemed to all think that it was related to PTSD. I was like, dude, I'm not depressed. I can't remember stuff. It became a nonstop argument with the doctors. And I got so aggravated, I finally just said, you know what? I think it's time to leave the Army.
I got out in '82. I'd been in 6 years. I felt that I did everything I wanted to do as a Marine at that point. So I went back to South Bend, Indiana. I didn't belong. I didn't fit in there. All the buddies that I had in high school, when they went to their junior prom, I was in boot camp. Guys went to their senior prom, I was in Okinawa. They didn't understand. I was a squad leader, sergeant in the Marine Corps, didn't mean nothing to them. So I did what the Marine Corps taught me to do best. Packed my sea bag and started moving. I hitchhiked all across the country, just looking for that place to fit in.
We get to Largo and we start getting settled in. I start applying for work. I probably put in several hundred to maybe even 1,000 applications. And I didn't get a single phone call, not even one. My wife's pregnant with our second child, so now I have another mouth to feed. What am I supposed to do? I got to a point where I just felt absolutely worthless. And I looked at my wife and I told her, I said, you know, Shannon, I think I'd be better off to this family if I was dead. The life insurance is still good. There should be enough money for you to be able to buy a small house and take care of the children for a while. I can't do this anymore. I've been thinking it for several months, and finally I said it.
I immediately called for help. They sent police officers out to deal with him. One of them happened to be a veteran. And he cupped his hand on Scott's shoulder and said, dude, I've been there too, let's go talk about it. There was something about the way he did that he got up and walked to his car with no problem. He wanted the help, we just couldn't find it. Because no matter which way he turned, it was a dead end, like being in a maze with no cheese at the end.
I lived in my car for 3 months, underneath an oak tree behind St. Paul's United Methodist Church here in Largo. I was an unemployed, homeless vet. But then I heard about this program they had at Bay Pines, vocational rehabilitation program. So I went down there and I spoke to some of the counselors and I got in front of a board. There was about 8 to 10 doctors, nurses, therapists, caseworkers, and counselors. And they all got to ask me 1 or 2 questions. And one of them asked me a question. She asked me, have you ever had thoughts of committing suicide? I didn't even think about it. The most natural, it came right off the top of my head. No big deal. Yeah, no more than anybody else. It was then I realized I had a problem. So I was accepted into the program. I was there for 4 months, and thank God that program was there. It turned my life around.
There are some days that I don't want to think about it, and I don't want to talk about it. And then there are other days that, yes, I do want to talk about it. And today is one of those days. You know, I was really feeling fulfilled being in the Marine Corps. I loved everything, the camaraderie, the discipline, the routine, everything. The feeling of being a part of something greater than yourself. I never had anything like it before the Marine Corps, and I haven't had anything like it since then. I have a fear of men. I have a fear of confined spaces. I have a fear of this. I have a fear of that. Hypervigilance is always there. It feels like I have night terrors every single night. I was given a service dog, Radar, and he's an extremely great comfort to me, and I feel like he's watching my back at all times. My husband says to me, he says, you know, Jessica, when you're at your best, there's no one that can top you. And while being a mother is my #1 priority right now, I feel like having been there, done that, gone through what I've gone through, I really feel like I could help someone.
I hang on. I hang on to a Bible verse, Matthew chapter 5, verse 16. Let your light so shine before men that they can see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. They love you, man.
I have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I have TBI, traumatic brain injury. I'm a prime example of a veteran that has these disabilities. All I want to do is be able to work and take care of my family. From 2011 to 2013, I worked for an organization called Abilities, doing contract closeout for the Department of Defense. And in the process, I got involved with the Ability One Speakers Bureau. I started attending college. I'm going to school online, and I'm studying political science. Because I asked for help, because I took that step forward, I'm holding it together. I have a positive outlook on the future. I'm out in the community sharing my story with others, trying to make everyone aware of the true nature of TBI and PTSD. And I try to set an example by living the Army Corps values.
We're on the start of year 10 of being married, and it's still like year 1. We have 3 kids. They're fun. They keep us busy. As far as dealing with his issues, we have really good phones now, and they do most of our thinking. They keep track of appointments, things with school, and so on. We do a lot of things at the beach. If he gets too stressed, we just go to the beach and sit. We have each other, and that's more than what most people have at all.
We found out that I was pregnant, so that made our decision. Our son Jamie was born about 6 months later, and we stayed about 6 months in DC. After that, we moved back to Erie, Pennsylvania, where I went back to school and I finished my college degree in business. I graduated and we moved to Florida. The military taught me a lot. It taught me about other people. It taught me about respect. The military, it helps you to understand people and learn what matters in life and what doesn't matter in life.
Julie and I were blessed with 3 amazing children. And, well, the kids, they complicated everything. So even though I loved my job and the military mission, I loved the people I worked with, everything was challenging and it was rewarding. I decided it was time to transition when I came home from a mission one time, and my kids didn't know who I was anymore. It was time. So I'm happy now. But I do miss the purpose-driven military life, the adrenaline surge of combat, and the brotherhood born of battle.
After a difficult transition, I co-founded the nonprofit Vet Sports in 2012 with 2 other combat wounded veterans. It's our mission to help other veterans transition back into civilian life through team sports and community involvement. We currently have 5 clubs, 1 in Tampa, 1 in Jacksonville, 2 in Michigan, and 1 in DC. I'm proud to say we've served over 2,000 veterans, and that number continues to rise. I was kind of a little punk when I went into the military, but 3 months of basic training gave me discipline, strength, and motivation. And because of it, I was able to come back stronger from my injuries. At this point, I could go through anything. I hit bottom, and I fought back.
The military does a great job of teaching you what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And your weaknesses are nothing to be ashamed of. I want to tell you one last story about a family I met in Iraq during my first deployment. It was an elderly mom and 3 daughters, and even though they lived in one of the richer suburbs of Baghdad, they had nothing left. In fact, the daughters were mostly supporting the family through prostitution. And I asked the mom one time when we were there, I said, "Don't you have any male children?" And she looked at me and said, "Well, yes, but you killed them all." So, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, they were all in the Iraqi army and they all left when you invaded and none of them ever came home, so we just assumed that you killed them." And her sentiment to us, even with that kind of personal loss, was this. She said, "You have no idea what this place was like before you got here. We could never thank you enough for what you've done for our family." You don't want it to be that way. You look to people to commiserate with or to find a shoulder to cry on when you need to. You process it, and then you move forward. Brian Simonson, United States Army.
Terry Davis, United States Navy.
Mike Dunlap, United States Marine Corps.
Taylor Urella, United States Army.
Jessica McVeigh, United States Marine Corps.
Shannon Owens, wife of Scott Owens, U.S. Army.